A big break in a Cleveland cold case. A mother of two, missing since 1997.
$350. That's how much cash was left untouched in Katherine Parisi's abandoned car. Money that a 25-year-old single mother would never have willingly left behind. Her keys still hung in the ignition, as if she had planned to return any minute, but she never would. On a quiet spring morning in 1997, Katherine vanished from the suburbs of Cleveland, leaving behind two young daughters who would spend the next 28 years searching for answers. The car, found in a shopping center parking lot, stood as a silent witness to whatever tragic events had unfolded. But it wouldn't be the only witness keeping secrets. Just down the street lived a man with a violent past, a man who would walk free for nearly 3 decades, while Katherine's daughters grew up wondering what happened to their mother. In January 2025, that freedom would finally come to an end. But the biggest question still remains. What really happened to Katherine Parisi?
That we enter a plea of not guilty to all counts.
Katherine. Kathy Parisi wasn't just another name in a case file. Those who knew her described her as the spark that lit up every room, armed with a quick wit and an infectious laugh that could brighten even the darkest days. At 25, she carried herself with a confidence that masked the weight of responsibility on her young shoulders. Her daughters, Cecilia and Angelina, were her world, 2 precious reasons to keep pushing forward despite the odds stacked against her. Born and raised in Cleveland, Kathy had always been known as someone who could find humor in life's challenges. Friends remember her sharp mind and warm heart, traits that made her natural at bringing people together. She was the friend you could call at 3 a.m., the sister who'd drop everything to help family, and above all, the mother who would do anything to provide for her children. But the late 1990s weren't kind to single mothers. While Kathy's love for her daughters was boundless, her options for supporting them were limited. Bills piled up, and the pressure to provide a stable life for her girls grew heavier with each passing month. Faced with difficult choices, she began working as an escort, a decision born not of desire, but desperation. It was a secret life she carefully balanced against her role as a mother, never letting the hardships of her situation dim the light she brought to others. To Cecilia and Angelina, their mother was simply Mom, the woman who could turn mundane moments into adventures, who'd dance with them in the kitchen while making dinner, who'd work long hours but still find energy to read them bedtime stories. They were too young to understand the sacrifices she made, the complex choices she faced, or that their time with her would be cut tragically short.
I only can remember our family broken. So it's nice to have those pictures of us all together, but I don't remember any of it.
She was funny and intelligent and, the life of the party, and she was always a good person.
These weren't just kind words spoken about the departed. They were echoes of a vibrant life that touched everyone around her, a life that deserved far more than its brutal ending. April 1997. Spring had arrived in Cleveland, bringing with it the promise of warmer days. For Katherine Parisi, it would be just another working day, or so she thought. She had received a call for an escort appointment in Parma, a quiet suburb just a short drive from her Cleveland home. Before leaving, she did what she always did, checked in with family, made sure her daughters were taken care of. These small routines, these ordinary moments would soon become painful memories for those she left behind. The address in Parma seemed normal enough, but when Katherine arrived, something was off. No one answered the door. This wasn't entirely unusual in her line of work. Sometimes clients got cold feet, sometimes addresses were wrong. But what happened next would set off alarm bells for everyone who knew her. Katherine never returned home. For a woman who always kept in touch with her family, who never went long without checking on her daughters, the silence was deafening. Hours stretched into a day and panic began to set in. Her family, already worried by her unusual absence, started reaching out to anyone who might have seen her. Then came the discovery that would haunt investigators for decades. Katherine's car was found abandoned in a shopping center on Cleveland's west side, near Brook Park Road and Interstate 480. The location itself raised questions. It wasn't on the way to or from her Parma appointment. Inside the car, investigators found her keys still in the ignition and $350 in cash untouched. For a single mother struggling to make ends meet, leaving that much money behind was completely out of character. It was as if she had stepped out of her car expecting to return at any moment. The scene offered few clues but spoke volumes. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of what might have happened. Just an empty car in a shopping center parking lot, keys waiting for an owner who would never return. The only witness to whatever happened that day was the car itself, silently guarding its secrets in that suburban parking lot. For investigators, the scene presented more questions than answers. Why was her car so far from her appointment? What made her stop at that shopping center? And most importantly, where was Katherine Parisi? The first 48 hours of any missing persons case are crucial, and investigators knew it. They began with the obvious, the Parma address, where Katherine was headed. But that lead quickly dissolved into frustration. The location provided no answers, no witnesses, no evidence of what might have happened to the young mother. Detectives worked through their standard playbook. They interviewed Katherine's known clients, traced her last phone calls, and canvassed the shopping center where her car was found. Security cameras, which might have provided vital clues, were either non-existent or had already recycled their footage. It was 1997, and surveillance technology wasn't what it is today. Each passing day seemed to take with it another chance at finding answers. The family refused to sit idle. They plastered missing person posters across Cleveland's west side, spoke to local media, and reached out to anyone who might have information. But the responses were painfully sparse. Those who knew about Katherine's work as an escort were hesitant to come forward, fearing their own exposure. The stigma surrounding her profession created a wall of silence that investigators struggled to break through. Channel 19 News took particular interest in the case, helping to keep Katherine's story alive in the public eye. But despite the media coverage and the family's tireless efforts, solid leads remained elusive. Investigators found themselves chasing shadows, anonymous tips that led nowhere, reported sightings that couldn't be verified, and theories that crumbled under scrutiny. As weeks turned into months, the active investigation began to slow. Katherine's case file grew thick with dead-end leads and unanswered questions. For her daughters, Cecilia and Angelina, each passing day meant growing up with one more memory they wouldn't get to share with their mother. The case that had started with such urgency was gradually sliding into the devastating limbo of cold case files, where it would sit for years, gathering dust but never forgotten. On the surface, Michael Bukowski seemed unremarkable. At 50 years old, he had built what appeared to be a stable life in Toledo, Ohio. A team leader at Chrysler Jeep, divorced father of 2 teenage daughters, he was the kind of person neighbors would describe as quiet, normal, someone who blended into the background of everyday life. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lay a history of violence that would make even seasoned investigators shudder. Few knew that Bukowski had lived just down the street from where Katherine's car was found in 1997. Even fewer knew about his dark past, a past that would eventually make him the prime suspect in her disappearance. But for investigators who dug deeper, the signs were always there, written in the pages of police reports dating back to his teenage years. At 16, Bukowski had already started down a dangerous path. Multiple robbery convictions had landed him under home confinement. But it was what he did while serving that sentence that revealed his true capacity for violence. One night, he snuck out of his parents' house, armed with a hammer, and broke into the home of a 14-year-old girl, someone he had previously raped. What followed was an attack so brutal that investigators would remember it decades later. The young girl survived, but barely, As assistant prosecuting attorney Ben McNair would later recount in court,
Mr. Bukowski snuck out of his parents' house, broke into the 14-year-old's house armed with a hammer, and beat that child nearly to death. He caused fractures of her jaw, of her skull, of her arm. The physician who attended to her said there was no reason why she ought to have survived that attack. And he admitted to doing this. And he admitted to doing it in order to intimidate her about that rape case.
this wasn't just a troubled teen acting out. It was a calculated act of violence meant to silence a victim. The parallel to Katherine's case was impossible to ignore. Here was a man who had demonstrated not just the capacity for violence, but the ability to plan, to target, and to cover his tracks. For years after Katherine's disappearance, Bukowski maintained his innocence. He denied knowing her, denied any contact with her. He continued his life in Toledo, working his job, raising his daughters, all while investigators kept a watchful eye. They knew about his proximity to where Katherine's car was found. They knew about his violent past.
He has always denied knowing Kathy. He has always denied having contact with her. And although he has known he was a suspect, what he has not known for the last 28 years is that we now have forensic evidence conclusively linking him to Katherine Parisi.
Time moves differently when you're waiting for answers. For Cecilia and Angelina, the years after their mother's disappearance weren't marked by normal childhood milestones, but by renewed searches, media appearances, and endless questions about what happened to their mom. "I only can remember our family broken," Cecilia would later say, clutching old photographs, frozen moments of a happiness she could barely recall. While other cold cases faded from public memory, Katherine's story refused to die, largely thanks to the persistent coverage of Channel 19 News. Their investigative team became unlikely allies in the family's quest for justice, regularly revisiting the case and keeping Katherine's story in the public eye. Without Channel 19's story, Angelina would later acknowledge, "I don't think we would have been able to be as successful at getting this case to move forward." Each year brought its own cruel ritual. Another birthday without their mother, another Christmas, another anniversary of her disappearance. The girls grew into women, carrying with them not just memories, but questions that haunted their every milestone. First dates, graduations, career choices, moments when a daughter needs her mother most were marked by an empty chair, an unspoken absence. Behind the scenes, investigators never fully abandoned the case. They re-examined old evidence, pursued new leads, and kept a watchful eye on Michael Bukowski. They knew that sometimes all it takes is one piece of evidence, one witness coming forward, one breakthrough to crack a decades-old case wide open. For 28 years, the truth about what happened to Katherine Parisi lay buried beneath layers of silence. But sometimes secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how long they've been hidden. In early 2024, that silence was finally about to break.
This is not the time to try the case. This is not the time to look at evidence or whatever they might have. The last 28 years, he's lived a reliable life and never moved from his residence and knew about this case and never attempted to flee.
April 2024 brought the first crack in the wall of silence. Behind closed doors, a Cuyahoga County grand jury heard evidence that investigators had quietly been building. The result was a secret indictment, 6 felony counts against Michael Bukowski, including murder, involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault, and abduction. But for months, this breakthrough remained hidden from public view, a carefully guarded secret as law enforcement prepared to make their move. The silence broke on a cold January morning in 2025. As dawn broke over Toledo, a joint task force of FBI agents, Cleveland Police, and Toledo's fugitive apprehension team converged on Bukowski's home. The man who had walked free for nearly 3 decades was finally in handcuffs. For Bukowski, it was just another Monday morning, preparing for his shift as a team leader at Chrysler Jeep. Instead, he found himself face to face with the past he thought he'd left behind. The charges painted a devastating picture. Along with murder and assault, prosecutors added 2 particularly chilling counts: tampering with evidence and gross abuse of a corpse. These charges, spanning from April 17th to April 19th, 1997, suggested that investigators had pieced together not just Katherine's disappearance, but what happened in the crucial hours and days afterward. News of the arrest spread quickly. Channel 19, which had kept Katherine's story alive for so many years, broke the story. For Angelina, the news brought a complex wave of emotions. "Arrest is almost enough comfort," she said, her voice steady, but tinged with decades of pain, "just to know that something has happened." The indictment revealed what investigators had long suspected. They believed Bukowski was connected to Katherine's work as an escort, but it was the forensic evidence, carefully gathered and preserved over decades, that had finally given them the breakthrough they needed. As one investigator noted, after 28 years of denials, Bukowski hadn't known they had evidence conclusively linking him to Katherine Parisi. Now, that evidence would finally see the light of day in a courtroom. The courtroom fell silent as Michael Bukowski appeared on video for his arraignment. He said nothing, letting his attorney enter a not guilty plea while Katherine's daughters watched. Women now older than their mother had been when she vanished. The defense painted Bukowski as a changed man, citing his steady job, medical conditions, and decades of living openly in Toledo, despite knowing he was a suspect. But prosecutors hadn't forgotten his violent past. They reminded the court of the hammer attack that had nearly killed a 14-year-old girl, suggesting it revealed his true nature.
We've waited over 25 years, and which has been my entire life, both our entire lives. And we've had to fight so hard and push this case for so long. And it hasn't been easy on her, and I don't think it should be as easy for him to get out.
The judge set bond at $500,000, a figure that spoke to the severity of the charges while acknowledging Bukowski's decades of staying put. For Katherine's daughters, it was a bittersweet moment. The man accused of taking their mother was finally facing justice. But one crucial piece remained missing. Katherine's body had never been found. More than anything, Angelina shared, we pray that he just confesses so we can have her remains. Today, as Michael Bukowski sits behind bars, awaiting trial, Katherine's daughters still hope for the one answer that has eluded them for 28 years. Where's their mother? The shopping center where her car was found still stands, a daily reminder to Cleveland residents of the young mother who vanished that spring day in 1997. The arrest of Bukowski raises disturbing questions. Was Katherine his only victim? Did others in the area go missing during those years? And what finally led investigators to make their move after nearly 3 decades? If you have any information about Katherine Parisi's case or her final resting place, please contact the Cleveland Police Department. And if this story moved you, consider sharing it, because sometimes it only takes one person seeing the right detail to help bring a family the closure they deserve.